Pratt ancestry doesn't begin in the early 1800s with Jared and Charity and their 5 boys. It goes back much farther. The Pratt name was first known in England in the late 1100-1200 period. For example, a famous knight fought next to Richard the Lionheart in the Crusades, who was named Peter Pratt, probably one of our ancestors. And the Pratt name originally comes from Latin. It means meadow, and it meant, when somebody was called John Pratt, it meant John of the Meadow, and that's the origin of the name. It was spelled a number of different ways, with a T, a double T, and an E, and also with Pratellus was another way it was spelled. So the early knights have the name Pratellus. Now, as we look at our history of the family, the first person we know very much about was named William Pratt, and he was born in the middle 1500s. He was born, as we would understand, into a poor family. But being a very smart young man and religiously motivated, he was able to get into Cambridge University. There were 3 classes of students at Cambridge. He was in the lowest class, which meant he was poor. And so he worked his way for 10 years through Cambridge, serving the royalty who were there, but attending the same classes with them. While at Cambridge, he attended Emmanuel College. Emmanuel College was the hotbed of the Puritan Revolution in England, those who were trying to purify or take the Anglican Church back to its original Christian roots. And undoubtedly, this Reverend William Pratt was part of that group. A man who followed him to Cambridge just a few years later, Thomas Hooker, was the one who came to America and brought with him 2 young boys named William and John Pratt, who were Reverend William Pratt's sons. And William Pratt graduated from Cambridge after 2 brief periods at other churches, settled in a place called Stevenage, England. Stevenage is about halfway between London and Cambridge. And there on the outskirts of Stevenage is a beautiful church called St. Nicholas, where Reverend Pratt was the rector for 30 years. He was the longest serving parish priest in the history of that parish, starting in the year 1200 all the way down to our time. And now I want to show you some pictures about his life. The first is a picture of the church where he would have gone as a young boy, in the town he grew up in called Baldock. This is the outside of the church, near where the altar is. You can see the small window below the large window. That's the place where lepers would be given the sacrament through under the window from the altar of the church. Surrounding the church is a spectacular, just a beautiful, beautiful cemetery. And there are hundreds of stones, but probably thousands of burial sites, and almost none of the stones would date back to this 1500 period. But it's clear that many of our earliest Pratt ancestors that we could know about in our records would be buried in this graveyard around this church. The interior of the church is very, very beautiful. The day we were there, they were taking all of the writings off the walls and putting in a historical database. This is a picture of the baptismal font that's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, where the first ancestor we really know much about, this Reverend William Pratt, would have been baptized as a child. Now, William Pratt then attended Cambridge University. This is a picture of King's College, the beautiful cathedral there where he might have attended, although he was educated at Emmanuel College, which was this hotbed of the Puritan Revolution. Now, when he settled with his family, Elizabeth, he became the parish priest here in Stevenage. This church and the area around it probably have looked very much this way for the last 400 years since he would have been the rector. If you look to the left, there's a tall tower. It's actually the first part of the church. It's a Norman tower built with flint. As you can see, it doesn't have stained glass windows. It has slits in it so you can shoot arrows or throw spears out of it. It was a defensive part of their town protection, and the church was built onto it over time. The ancient door to the church here is probably 500 or 600 years old. The church itself dates back into the 1200s. Inside the Norman tower is where the bells are. And if you can imagine, our first ancestor to America, young William, grew up here in this parish. What do you think your job was if you were the parish priest's boy? You probably rang the bells in this tower, and these steps up to the bell and the ropes for the bell have probably been just like this for nearly 500 years. On the wall of the church is this list of parish priests starting in the 1200s, and William Pratt is there in the middle. He's the longest serving parish priest here during the last 800 years. We know that the people loved him because he's the only priest who has a plaque telling about his family near the altar of this particular church. You can see it on the left in black. When you look at it close up, it's written in Latin, but essentially says, William Pratt, who was a doctor of sacred theology, served here for 30 years as our rector, or the parish priest. He had 6 children, 3 sons, John, William, and Richard, and it's John and William who came to America, and 3 daughters, Sarah, Mary, and Elizabeth, and his wife's name was also named Elizabeth. And it says, very beautifully in Latin, that he had immigrated to the celestial world in 1629, which was his last year of service as the parish priest. This wonderful church Stevenage is surrounded by a very, very large and beautiful cemetery. Thousands of people are probably buried there, many of our relatives and ancestors of this family of William Pratt.